کنفرانس در مقر سازمان ملل، حفاظت اشرف و الزامات ملل متحد، با حضور رئیس جمهور برگزیده مقاومت، ژنو، 21 سپتامبر 2011، 30 شهریور 90. دکتر آلخو ویدال کوادراس، نایب رئیس پارلمان اروپا. استران استیونسون، رئیس هیئت رابطه با عراق در پارلمان اروپا. نون تومبی توتو، مدافع حقوق بشر و مبارز ضد نژاد پرستی، فرزند اسقف دزموند توتو، مبارز نامدار ضد آپارتاید. پروفسور روز وجبود، رئیس بخش حقوق بین الملل دانشگاه جان هاپکینز، عضو هیئت امنای سیاست دفاعی آمریکا 2003-2009. نخست وزیر سید احمد غزالی، پروفسور آلفرد زایاس، مشاور حقوقی ارشد کمیسر عالی حقوق بشر به مدت 22 سال، استاد حقوق بین الملل در ژنو. میشل ژولی، دبیرکل بنیاد دانیل میتران. کریستیان پرگو، رئیس مشترک شورای قانونگذاری ژنو، استاد دانشگاه ژنو. مارک فالکه، نماینده پارلمان ژنو. گیا فرانکو فاتورینی، رئیس مشترک جنبش علیه نژاد پرستی و برای دوستی خلقها، نماینده مراپ در ملل متحد. مادلین ریس، دبیرکل لیگ بین المللی زنان برای صلح و آزادی. کارن پارکر، رئیس انجمن توسعه بین المللی آموزش، دارای رتبه مشورتی ملل متحد. کریشنا آهوجا پاتل، عضو هیئت مدیره لیگ بین المللی زنان برای صلح و آزادی. تام گانیاتسوس، نماینده بنیاد حقوق بشری مارانگوپولوس. پیام‌هایی از دانیل میتران و اسقف دزموند توتو. خانم دانیل میتران، برای اشرف همه گونه حصارهای مجازی یا نامرئی اختراع کردند و تصور می‌کنند می‌توانند به مقاومت یک خلق پایان دهند. اما در اشرف امید به فوریت باز می‌گردد و شما مریم رجبی عزیز آن امید را نمایندگی می‌کنید. دوستان عزیز و نازنین اشرفی من، الگویی را که شما برای تمام ستمدیدگان ترسیم می کنید و پیام امیدی را که با خونتان خطاب بشریت می نویسید همه باید همواره مد نظر داشته باشند. اسقف دزموند توتو. آزار اشرف توسط نیروهای رژیم ایران و نیروهای عراقی باید توسط همه افراد آزادیخواه محکوم شود. اخیراً کمیساریای عالی پناهندگان اعلام کرد در نظر دارد موقعیت پناهندگی را در نظر بگیرد. من از دولت عراق و جامعه بین المللی می خواهم به این روند احترام بگذارند و کاری کنند که امنیت و حفاظت ساکنان اشرف تضمین شود. کنفرانس در مقر سازمان ملل، حفاظت اشرف و التزامات ملل متحد، با حضور رئیس جمهور برگزیده مقاومت، ژنو، 21 سپتامبر 2011، 30 شهریور 90.
Mesdames et messieurs, chers amis, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à cette conférence en qualité de secrétaire général de la Fondation France Liberté Daniel Mitterrand. Et je tiens tout particulièrement à remercier notre invitée d'honneur, Madame Mariam Hadjavi, présidente élue du Conseil national de la résistance iranienne, qui a répondu à notre invitation à l'occasion d'un voyage à Genève pour plaider la cause d'Ashraf. Mais dès à présent, je voudrais souligner la présence parmi nous de deux personnalités européennes qui ont été toujours à la pointe de la vaste campagne internationale pour la défense d'Ashraf et qui ont rejoint ce panel malgré leur programme très chargé au Parlement européen. Je veux parler d'Alejo Vidal-Quadras et de Stuart Stevenson. Le camp d'Ashraf abrite, vous le savez, près de 3400 membres de l'opposition principale iranienne, l'Organisation des Moudjahidines du peuple d'Iran. La sécurité et l'intégrité physique de ces résidents est une préoccupation majeure que la Fondation France Liberté Daniel Mitterrand partage depuis de nombreuses années avec la résistance iranienne. C'est en effet Madame Mitterrand qui, la première, s'est déplacée à Genève après le massacre d'Ashraf de juillet 2009 pour rencontrer personnellement Madame Navi Pillay, la haute commissaire, et lui faire part de ses inquiétudes profondes quant à la forte probabilité d'autres attaques sanglantes contre Ashraf. Nous savons tous que le régime iranien est très inquiet des répercussions du printemps arabe. Il en va de même pour le gouvernement irakien de Nouri al-Maliki, qui a lié son destin à celui de la théocratie au pouvoir en Iran. C'est pourquoi il insiste sur la clôture du camp d'Ashraf jusqu'à la fin de cette année, d'ici la fin de cette année, par tous les moyens. Le blocus médical, qui a coûté la vie à 11 blessés et malades graves depuis le 8 avril. La torture psychologique qui continue au moyen de 300 haut-parleurs. L'interdiction de l'entrée du fioul. L'installation d'appareils à proximité du camp pour intercepter ou brouiller les communications sont autant de signes précurseurs alarmants. La récente déclaration du HCR, qui reconnaît des droits et des protections, donc un statut aux résidents d'Ashraf, est une avancée significative, mais pas encore une garantie suffisante. Ainsi, l'installation d'une équipe permanente d'observateurs de l'UNAMI à Ashraf et l'ouverture d'une enquête impartiale et transparente par le bureau de la haute commissaire aux droits de l'homme, que nous avions déjà demandé il y a 3 ans, sont devenues des mesures indispensables Avant de passer la parole aux intervenants, je voudrais vous lire un texte préparé par Danielle Mitterrand à l'hôpital il y a quelques jours. Elle a intitulé ce texte « Les murs d'Ashraf ». C'est elle qui parle. Pendant l'occupation nazie en France, nous étions des milliers de jeunes opprimés, séquestrés et silencieux, qui rêvions notre avenir dans une Europe sans frontières, où chacun se reconnaîtrait selon sa culture et sa langue, en attachement et fidélité au territoire qu'il a vu naître. Nous étions alors des terroristes. C'est à cette période que j'ai compris que les murs les plus contraignants et les plus violents ne sont pas les murs de béton, de pierre ou de fer des prisons, mais ceux qu'une dictature vous force à porter en vous-même, ces murs d'humiliation, de renoncement et d'épuisement. Ces murs qui vous privent jusqu'à votre identité. On a inventé pour Ashraf toutes sortes de nouveaux murs immatériels. Tout d'abord le mur de l'oubli, puis celui du mensonge, puis celui du silence, puis celui du blocus alimentaire et sanitaire, et puis enfin le mur des décibels, et puis le mur de l'écoute et du brouillage électronique. Le progrès technique a toujours enflammé l'imagination des bourreaux. Tuer et laisser mourir, abandonner les blessés et prélever des otages innocents et impuissants. C'est ainsi que l'on croit pouvoir venir à bout de la résistance d'un peuple. Mais à Ashraf, l'espoir revient vite, car malgré les murs, chacun sait que cet espoir est partagé par des milliers de frères et de sœurs réfugiés à travers le monde. Vous en êtes ici, chère Myriam Rajavi, la représentante. Alors l'énergie revient avec le désir de vivre et le rêve d'un monde juste, assurant la paix et la protection de chacun. La paix et la protection de chacun, n'est-ce pas le thème de notre réunion d'aujourd'hui? Dans un camp, il ne s'agit pas de survivre pour soi, mais pour les autres. Les mamans, les mères, ont la pratique quotidienne de ce sacrifice. Nous connaissons tous l'exemple magnifique que nous donne la petite Chagaillé dans sa lettre à Madame Pillay. Et voilà ce qui distingue le bourreau de la victime, le geôlier de son prisonnier. Les uns préparent l'avenir, tandis que les autres détruisent le présent. Préparer l'avenir, chers et tendres amis d'Ashraf, c'est le prix de votre sacrifice. Mais ce n'est pas le seul. Il faut compter aussi avec l'exemple que vous donnez à tous les opprimés et le message d'espoir écrit avec votre sang que vous adressez à l'humanité. Je vous remercie. Je donne la parole à Madame Mariam Rajavi.
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, thank you all. Well, it is a momentous moment to be here, especially after so many achievements by the Iranian resistance that could not have been possible without your support. As we are standing in this UN building, let us remind ourselves of the values this House represents. The hope of a world to safeguard human rights, peace, democracy, and prevent genocide. 66 years ago, this organization was established to protect and represent the wishes of people in need of security and dignity, to voice the unheard. With the expanding Arab Spring in the region, what would be UN role? My intervention, therefore, is focused on a pivotal question. Why is the UN delaying in its moral, ethical, and historic obligations towards these challenges? But before we proceed to answer this, I would like to express my gratitude to organizers of this conference, which is addressing human rights in Iran and the important issue of Ashraf. I would also like to express my gratitude to Madame Mitterrand as the great First Lady of Human Rights, who has always been a pioneer in defense of the Iranian people and Ashraf residents. The Iranian resistance has deep respect for democracy, human rights, peace, and the right to asylum. Clearly, safeguarding these values is the purpose of the United Nations. Over 120,000 members of this resistance have been killed by a religious fascism in a struggle to safeguard such values. I have a dream that one day our homeland Iran would be the land of freedom, democracy, equality, peace, coexistence, a land in which the rule of law and respect for human rights and international law are established. On last Sunday, the mullahs hanged 23 people only in one day. During 8 months, 490 people have been executed. Protests are violently suppressed. Recently, hundreds of people have been arrested during protests in Oromia and Tabriz in northwest Iran. Prisoners, especially family members of Ashraf residents, are mistreated and tortured to death. In view of all this, it is disappointing that the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mrs. Pillay, did not mention the gross violation of human rights in Iran during the UN Human Rights Council. Developments in the Middle East and the fall of dictators has clearly convinced Khamenei that he must quickly obtain the nuclear bomb and reinforce his position in Iraq. His main objective is to suppress uprisings in Iran with Ashraf at its center. Camp Ashraf is the bastion of hope for the Iranian people and cannot be separated from the Iranian people's uprisings. Following every uprising in Iran, the mullahs attack Ashraf. Last month, Professor Jean Ziegler, Vice Chair of the UN Human Rights Advisory Committee, described Ashraf as the focal point of democratic values that continuously undermines the legitimacy of the mullahs regime. Therefore, the plot to destroy Camp Ashraf is continuing in a most inhuman way. The UNHCR statement on September 13 about the legal status of Ashraf residents underlines the responsibility of the UN, UNAMI, and Human Rights Commissioner, Madame Pillay. the UN Refugee Agency has declared the residents of Ashraf as asylum seekers. It stresses that international law requires that they must be able to benefit from basic protection of their security and well-being. It also calls on the Iraqi government to extend its deadline for closure of Ashraf. This was a crucial step, but it is not enough. Bearing in mind there is no rule of law, no respect for international law, in Iraq at the moment, it is the prime duty and responsibility of the international community to safeguard those needs in practice. Firstly, it is crucial that the UN Secretary General and UNAMI take practical measures to guarantee internationally recognized protection of Ashraf. This would be realized through the Secretary General's instruction. Declaring Ashraf as a civilian zone under UN monitoring is necessary. He should then order the stationing of a UN monitoring team in Ashraf. If the UN monitoring team had not left Ashraf in July 2010, the April 8 massacre would not have happened. Secondly, the UNHCR should recognize all Ashraf residents as political refugees in order to prevent attacks by the Iranian regime and its Iraqi proxies. Thirdly, the United States must participate in securing and implementing the protection which is underscored by UNHCR's statement, and in particular prevent the Iraqi government from violating the rights of Ashraf residents while providing necessary protective measures to able UN team observing mission. I would also like to call on the Swiss government as the guardian of Geneva Conventions to take urgent measures in order to guarantee the protection of the residents of Ashraf. Finally, I would like to mention a few matters that have not been resolved since the April 8 massacre by the UNHCR. If the investigation into the April 8 massacre, emphasized by Mrs. Pillay, was completed by now, much of the inhuman pressures exerted on Ashraf residents would not be taken place today. Using 300 loudspeakers to psychological torture Ashraf residents, installation of electronic jamming and intercept stations around the camp, depriving the wounded and sick people from needed medical care, and many more issues. Are these not a major violation of human rights? The deadline to close Camp Ashraf by end of 2011 is a warning of yet another massacre. The UNHCR has been absolutely silent about the Iraqi government's ultimatum to close down Ashraf. Even in its report to the Human Rights Council on June and September 2011, the UNHCR has not mentioned violations of human rights in Iran and Ashraf. For the past 150 days, Iranians and families of Ashraf residents have staged a sitting in front of UN agencies in Geneva to demand international protection for Ashraf. We call on the United States of America, the European Union, and also the Swiss government to provide protection for Ashraf residents until a peaceful and long-term solution is found. The silence over executions and torture of Iranian political prisoners must end. The Iranian resistance demands the referral of the Iranian regime's violation of human rights to the UN Security Council. I thank you all very much.
Bien, je vous propose d'écouter maintenant Monsieur Struan Stevenson.
We are all here because we share a very great and deep concern for the people of Ashraf. Yesterday when I arrived, I spoke to a young lady who is here in the audience. She told me that her sister is in Ashraf. I said, I really hope your sister was not one of the people injured during the massacre on the 8th of April, during that violent, horrific attack. She said to me that she was sprayed by high-pressure boiling water and scalded. I had not heard that this had occurred. So when 2,000 military personnel with armored vehicles attacked these 3,400 unarmed civilians and shot them down like rabbits, ran over them with tanks, crushing them to the ground, and spraying girls with boiling water. They went there to murder, to maim, to cause maximum disfigurement and injury and death. And there has been no remorse from Nouri al-Maliki and his government. I went to Baghdad 2 weeks after that massacre with a small delegation from the European Parliament to remonstrate with President Talabani, with Foreign Minister Zabari, with al-Najafi, the Speaker of the Parliament, with the leaders of the Iraqi government. Nouri al-Maliki was absent in South Korea. And we said this kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable. We are trying to help in the European Union the rebuilding of Iraq. And this is how you repay what we are doing, by a massacre of unarmed civilians. As Mrs. Rajavi has just outlined, he has asked for the 3,400 residents to apply for individual asylum, and immediately 3,400 applications arrived on his desk. The capacity for organization of the PMOI should never be underestimated. And these people now are protected persons under international law. And Nouri al-Maliki should pay attention to this. We will not tolerate any further violence or attacks on the people of Ashraf. But it's time that the OHCHR took some action. We need a combined strategy from the UN. We need protection of these people while UNHCR carry out their individual interviews and the registration process of all these refugees goes ahead. We need the blue flag of the UN flying above this refugee camp, because that's what it is. And until we get that level of protection, these people continue to be at risk. I was handed today a statement taken from the official website of the Foreign Ministry of Iraq by the Deputy Foreign Minister, stating Iraq is determined to close Ashraf base by the end of this year. They are far from expressing remorse about what happened in April. They're sticking to this ridiculous deadline, which is unacceptable, unachievable, and must be cancelled. We do not need threats. We do not need intimidation. We do not need the continued psychological torture going on around Camp Ashraf with the loudspeakers Mrs. Rajavi spoke about. Ladies and gentlemen, in the years I have been engaged in this issue, we have variously heard all of the misinformation, all of the stories, the lies. I have at various times been told, but wait a minute, these people are terrorists. Well, repeated court cases in Europe have said that they are not terrorists. And now the federal court in Washington, D.C. has said they are not terrorists. And please, Mrs. Hillary Clinton, take notice of what your courts are telling the State Department. We have repeatedly been told this Camp Ashraf, these people in there, they are part of a cult. These people are not part of a cult. They are freedom fighters who want to restore freedom and democracy to their homeland of Iran. The lies and misinformation which has dogged our policy and our strategy all of these years, the time for negatives is finished. The time for action has arrived. First of all, cancel this ridiculous and threatening deadline for clearing Ashraf by the end of this year. Secondly, provide protection now. Put the blue flag over this refugee camp. It's not a lot to ask, but it's what we are all here today asking for. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mrs. President, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am pleased that in coincidence with the United Nations Human Rights Council session, I've been invited to participate in this roundtable to defend a very important human rights case in our world today, the situation of the residents of Camp Ashraf in Iraq. To refer to Camp Ashraf as a very important case, especially in the Middle East, where every day many human beings lose their lives at the hands of dictators, of terrorists, and especially when one considers that the murder of innocent people, irrespective of nationality, religion, political inclination or race, has become part of the landscape in the region. However, the case of Ashraf has a deep significance that I want to point out. By conducting a massacre in Ashraf, the Iranian regime wishes to continue its suppression of the uprising of a whole nation of 80 million people. It is looking to obliterate a source of inspiration and hope for a great number of Iranians who aspire to live in democracy and freedom. But the mullahs in Tehran have a wider objective too. In eliminating Ashraf and the PMOI, they want to remove the most important political and cultural impediment against Islamic fundamentalism. In the Muslim world, we are witnessing a confrontation of two interpretations, two types of Islam. One is the Islam of violence, backwardness, and misogyny that is represented by the mullahs in Iran. The other is the Islam of tolerance, peace, human rights, that the Iranian resistance, Mrs. Rajavi, and the Ashraf residents promote and practice. In a nutshell, the suppression of Ashraf paves the way for widespread massacre in Iran and the spread of fundamentalism in the region. On the contrary, protecting Ashraf is tantamount to defending democracy in this convulsed part of the world. 3 years ago, in October 2008, during a 3-day visit to Ashraf that I will never forget, I met and spoke with hundreds of residents and came to realize that Ashraf people are a moral and a spiritual example for the people of Iran and a credit to the Islamic community. What I witnessed in Ashraf was a model of morality, of solidarity, and of brotherhood. This is in essence what has helped Ashraf residents to resist all pressures over the years. I'm sure that any visitor to Ashraf would draw the same conclusions from this unforgettable experience. I will not repeat here what prominent international experts, Struan, have said already, or the very important things that the rest of panelists are going to say this afternoon. I will instead share 3 points with you in the time I've been given. The first point is that what Mrs. Rajavi is requesting from the United Nations for the protection of Ashraf is something very concrete and very practical. The UNHCR has already taken a significant step, and now the Secretary General, the UNHCR and UNAMI should take another step forward and place Ashraf under permanent monitoring by stationing observers there. The written declaration of 25th November 2010 by the European Parliament, approved by absolute majority, reads, and I quote, calls on the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy to urge the United Nations to provide urgent protection for Ashraf. Following the position adopted by UNHCR, we are working full force for the European Union to support and facilitate the stationing of observers. Mrs. Rajavi has declared that the Iranian community in the world and families of Ashraf residents are even prepared to pay the expenses for protecting UN observers. This demonstrates the unique capacities of this resistance. However, we must take into account that practical problems can always be overcome. The question is not so much practical as political. The question is to find the political will in the United Nations, in the European Union, in the United States, the political will to act. In particular, the European Union should exert political pressure on the government of Iraq to respect the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees Declaration and suspend the deadline. My second point is that I am fully familiar with the psychological warfare and the demonizing campaign of the Iranian regime against Ashraf and the PMOI. The Iranian regime invests enormously so that in the European Parliament we stop supporting the Iranian resistance. In spite of their efforts, we recognized this psychological war and stood against it. I must say I feel extremely disappointed when I hear sometimes that bogus information receives attention in the United Nations and its related bodies. 5 delegations from the European Parliament have been to Ashraf, and they have investigated everything. My good friend and our pioneer, Paolo Casaca, who led several delegations, published a comprehensive report in several languages that offers answers to all questions. I suggest that the High Commissioner for Human Rights dispatches a delegation to Ashraf. We have time to spend there in order to carefully examine every aspect of life in the camp, and then to publish a report based on first-hand research and not on the reports fabricated by the Iranian regime. And my third and final point is that the Iranian resistance in Ashraf have offered strong evidence of their commitment to political and moral values that we in the democratic world consider as essential to building an open society. When I read the political program that President Rajavi has proposed for her country, for the future, I always say the same. Where can I sign? Because this is exactly what we believe in the European institutions. No difference. Unfortunately, the United States, the European Union, have been sometimes obstructing the path of the Iranian resistance in Ashraf. As a European, when I think of how we labeled the movement with the terrorist act against factual information and against legality, I feel deeply embarrassed. And when I see that in Iraq, the country we supposedly wanted to liberate, the United States leaves unarmed and defenseless Ashraf residents exposed to deadly attacks by powerful military forces, frankly, I do not understand such contradictions. We should not allow these grave violations of human rights to be repeated. The future of the region and of global peace and stability depend crucially on the transformation of Iran into a true democracy, where the rule of law, equality between men and women, the respect of human rights and religious freedom are the principles that inspire legislation and common behavior. We should work full steam ahead and rise to our responsibility to support the Iranian democratic resistance and protect Ashraf. It is the future of Iran, it is the future of the Middle East, but it is already our future which is at stake. Thank you very much.
À Madame Naomi Cecilia Tutu, dont le nom vous dira sans doute quelque chose.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madame Rajavi, and thank you for all who are here today. I come wearing a few different hats, and the first hat is as a South African raised under apartheid. And in those days, as a young person, one of the things that I thought over and over, and that my friends and family asked ourselves, where is the rest of the world? Do they not care that our brothers and sisters are being arrested? Do they not care that our children are being killed on the streets? Do they not care that our parents are being moved from their ancestral homes? Where is the international community? Today, we find ourselves in the same place, where the people of Camp Ashraf are asking us the very same questions. Where are you? Where are you as we are suffering? Where are you as we are being killed? Where are you as we are being harassed night and day? Our women insulted through loudspeakers surrounding our camp. Where is the international community to support our human rights? I come as a South African who grew up at a time when the apartheid government paid attention to the boogeyman at that time of the West, which was communism, and therefore named the act that outlawed any criticism of apartheid the Suppression of Communism Act, so that those in the West would not question when South Africans were arrested or banned or forced to flee their country. And today we know that oppressive regimes around the world know the boogeyman of today, terrorism, so that if you can label your opposition terrorist, the world will not ask questions of what you do to your people. And so the people of Camp Ashraf have been labeled terrorists, even after investigation after investigation has shown that this is not true. So I come as one who says, I do not want to be a part of a world community that is going to be questioned again as to where were you when we were massacred? What did you say to stop our suffering? What did you do to protect our families? We have the opportunity now to be those who speak up for Camp Ashraf, who apply pressure on our governments and the United Nations to protect the people of that area. I know the High Commissioner for Human Rights of the UN, Madame Pillay, is someone who understands the struggle against oppression, who understands the need for protection against violence. I know that she is one whose heart is in the right place. And we are here to encourage her to move not just her heart, but also the actions of the High Commission to protect the people of Camp Ashraf, to send a monitoring group to ensure the safety of Camp Ashraf. I come also wearing the hat of a citizen both of South Africa and of the United States, knowing that it was the forces led by the United States that disarmed the people of Camp Ashraf and assured them of their protection. Subsequently, that protection, we know, was handed over to the Iraqi government, and protection has turned to assault. So I come as one who says I am also a voice to say my other country, my other home, we have a responsibility to the people of Camp Ashraf. And finally, I come wearing the hat of the daughter of. And that is one that I have had all my life and comes with its own costs and benefits. Today it comes with some pride in having the opportunity to read a statement from my father to this gathering. And I quote, "I have in the past expressed my support for the people of Camp Ashraf. They have been granted protected status by both the United Nations and the multinational force headed by the United States in Iraq. Since responsibility for their protection has been transferred to the Iraqi military, the camp has experienced harassment by both Iranian and Iraqi forces. The attacks and harassment experienced by the residents of the camp are in fact human rights abuses that require condemnation from all freedom-loving people. Just this month, the UN High Commission for Refugees has declared its intention to consider individual applications for refugee status by residents of the camp. I ask the Iraqi government and the international community to respect the integrity of this process and to see to it that the residents of Camp Ashraf are ensured their safety and security so that the UNHCR can fulfill its mandate in a safe and confidential location. I am Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Emeritus of Cape Town, September 20th, 2011, New York, New York.
Bien, je propose maintenant à Madeleine Reiss de prendre la parole. Madeleine Reiss, qui est la secrétaire générale de la Ligue internationale des femmes pour la paix et la liberté.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and also wonderful to see so many people here coming to listen to so many people speaking on this very important issue. I will be brief because the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom has given support to Camp Ashraf over the years, but more in a passive way rather than directly engaging. And I say that because we are like many of the NGOs that work in Geneva. We want to see the systems work. And I have to say that after listening to the conversations and the interventions around Camp Ashraf, particularly those powerful presentations from the panel, it's as if we're sitting in some surreal environment here. What is it? Camp Ashraf actually seems to represent the schizophrenia of the United Nations and its member states. That what we have on the one hand, we're sitting here at the home of human rights, where human rights are being protected, where we have come up with doctrines of the responsibility to protect, of international protection, and we're seeing 3,400 people who have laid down and surrendered their arms and demanded international protection, and been told they would have it, sitting there waiting for the next massacre, which will happen as soon as the deadline is up for them to be removed from the camp. Now, what is the solution to that? It is not the rhetoric that we're hearing coming from those over the corridors who are talking in the Human Rights Council. Neither is the rhetoric from the Security Council, who are not engaging sufficiently. Let us think more clearly as to how this system should work and how we as NGOs working in Geneva can help to make the system work. Quite clearly, all the issues raised by the panelists in terms of human rights violations need to be addressed, and there must be accountability for those who have violated them. The system is in place for that to happen. Where is it? Why is it not working? It's a triumph of the political over international law, and we cannot allow that to happen, otherwise international law will be denigrated. It is a personal comment that many times I've walked past the demonstrators defending Camp Ashraf. Very well organized, fabulously organized. Yes, we will now for sure. But one of the things that comes across all the time is the prejudice that there is and the misinformation that goes on. I am told, but they're terrorists, but they committed war crimes, but they treat their women badly, and so on and so forth, as if that even mattered when it comes to human rights, because the universality of human rights incorporates everyone, and if there were any truth in those, they have been investigated, and there is no doubt that they should have been prosecuted. If there were evidence, there was not. So let us put on one side and dismiss those arguments and move on to what must happen as a matter of human rights law obligation and international humanitarian law obligation. That has been set up by UNHCR. They will and have committed to actually ensuring the security. They cannot do it alone. Let us invoke the responsibility to protect and say to the United States and other governments that have a direct influence on Iraq that they must use that influence as a matter of international legal obligation to prevent massacres. Not to go and bomb Iraq afterwards. That's not how the responsibility to protect should work, because we know that that will not happen. What we're looking for is a peaceful solution, one based on international law, invoking the doctrines that have already been put in place, and putting political and moral prejudice on one side so that it can actually be realized. It's difficult, it seems. It shouldn't be, but it is. But we need that clarity. And I would invite all of us in the room who are engaging with the Council and with the human rights mechanisms to put additional pressure on the Human Rights Council to demand that there be a monitoring mission by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and by the European Union, and also to get involved the Special Representative of the Secretary General on the prevention of genocide, because his mandate is not only on the prevention of genocide, it is on the prevention of mass violations of international humanitarian law. If we're serious about prevention, then let us use the mechanisms to make sure that it doesn't happen. Bon courage.